Welcome to week 10 of Operations Management course. Agenda for today's lecture is as follows. First, we will be studying about capacity planning. Under capacity planning, there are two different concepts, utilization and efficiency, break-even analysis. The second concept which we will be studying is location decisions. Under location decisions, we will be studying about the location selection problem. Please note that the things which are marked in green color will be tested for your final examination. So we will be looking at some numerical questions today. And please try to practice more questions. I will be posting an announcement about the questions which you should be practicing from these topics. So let's start with capacity. Capacity typically refers to the number of units a facility can hold, receive, store, or produce in a certain period of time. Let's think of a manufacturing unit which produces certain items. So capacity in that particular case refers to the number of items which could be produced in a certain period of time. Let's think of a warehouse. In the case of a warehouse, capacity refers to the number of items that can be kept inside that particular warehouse for a certain period of time. And capacity is extremely important because it impacts all the other 10 decisions of operations management. So the capacity determines the fixed cost which has to be incurred in the process, and it also determines whether the demand will be satisfied. If the capacity is very, very low and if demand is high, there are chances of stock out situation, which is not a good thing. So there should be sufficient capacity. If the capacity is too high and the demand is low, in that case there is a chance of material getting damaged due to the expiry date. So there is a nice interplay which happens between capacity management and the demand management. So whenever we try to discuss about capacity, there are three different horizons in which we can consider capacity. It can be a short term or intermediate term or long term. So short term is anything which is less than 6 months. Less than 6 months is what we can call as a short term. And intermediate is anything between say 6 to 24 months. Sorry for my handwriting, just using it for the first time. And long term refers to anything greater than 2 years. So short term, intermediate term, and long term. Now, under capacity, there are two different keywords which we normally discuss. I will give an example in the next slide to make these concepts clear, first let's try to understand the definition of those two keywords. So the first keyword is design capacity. So the word design capacity refers to the maximum output that we can expect from a system. So this definition is with respect to a machine. For example, a machine which can produce a theoretical maximum which can come out of a machine can be referred to as the design capacity of that particular machine. So it is typically measured in terms of a rate. The rate could be in terms of number of products being manufactured per day or the number of items produced per hour. So anything. So it's not only measured in terms of the rate. Now, as you see in the first case, so design capacity is a theoretical maximum, but the thing is effective capacity is the more realistic representation of the capacity of a machine or of a firm, because there will be some operating constraints which will not allow a machine to reach its theoretical maximum. This is referred to as the effective capacity. Let us understand what it means in the subsequent slides. So let's take a good example. Let us consider a chips manufacturing unit which operates for 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. And let's assume that we are considering one particular machine in that particular chips manufacturing unit. We are considering a packing machinery. So if the packing machine can pack 100 packets of chips in an hour, in 1 hour 100 packets could be packed. Now, so the design capacity per week is, we are interested in finding the design capacity per week. So in a week, the total hours is 24 hours in a day and 7 days in a week. So 24 multiplied by 7. If I multiply it by 100, I get the design capacity of this particular machine in a week. So when I calculate it, it comes to 16800 packets per week. So as you see here, the design capacity is measured as a rate. The rate is packets per week in this case. Now, what is the problem with this calculation? In this calculation, we are assuming that the machine, for example, the machine is the workers who are operating this particular machine are working throughout the day, 24 hours without taking any break. They are working, but in practice, this is not at all possible. Typically, there will be a lunch break, washroom break, and so on. So let's assume that we are observing that in a day, on an average, 3 hours of break happens for, say, washroom break and lunch break. So the effective time the packing machine is working is only 21 hours. So the effective capacity of this particular machine per week will be 21 times 7 multiplied by 100, which is 14700 packets per week. So as you can see here, the effective capacity is lesser than the design capacity, and it's also measured in terms of a rate. Here the rate is packets per week. Now, so effective capacity is what every firm aspires to achieve. But in reality, it may not be always possible to achieve the number provided here. What could be the reason? Let's look at the next slide. So, but the actual output in a particular week may not be equal to the effective capacity. The reason being, let's say there has been a breakdown of that particular machine, or let's say there has been a power outage which happened and the machine was off for a certain period of time, or let's say the packaging material which is needed for this particular machinery, the input for this particular thing, the packaging material, assume that it's not available. In that particular case, our actual output would be lesser than the effective capacity. So just to summarize what we have discussed till now, we have discussed about the design capacity, effective capacity, and actual output. Using these three keywords, we will be introducing two concepts now. So this will be tested for your final examination. So the first concept is called as utilization. The second concept is called as efficiency. So utilization is a ratio of actual output to the design capacity. So the actual output to the design capacity, if we take the ratio of that, we get the utilization. And efficiency is the ratio of actual output to the effective capacity. As we have seen in the previous slide, the effective capacity is always less than or equal to the design capacity. In general, the effective capacity is less than the design capacity. So think of it, you are taking a ratio of actual output to the design capacity. So the denominator in the calculation of utilization is going to be bigger than the denominator. So the design capacity is higher, bigger than the denominator in the calculation of efficiency. So that means whenever you calculate, you always get the value of utilization lesser than the efficiency. If you got the other way, that means there is something wrong in your calculation. So this is a thumb rule for your examination. Your utilization ratio will always be less than the efficiency percentage. So let's take another example to make sure that we are understanding this concept very well. So this is an example of Sarah Dames Bakery. In this particular bakery, the bakery operates for 3 different shifts, 3 8-hour shifts, and 7 days a week. The design capacity per hour is 1200 rolls per hour. The effective capacity per week is 175,000 rolls, and the actual production last week has been 148,000 rolls. So the first question is, what is the design capacity per week? The second thing we are interested is to measure the utilization. The third thing is the efficiency. So let's try to find out the design capacity per week. In order to measure the design capacity per week, I need to know the design capacity per hour, which is 1200. So 1200 multiplied by, it is working for 3 8-hour shifts. So in a day, it's going to work for 24 hours. So 1200 multiplied by 24 multiplied by 7 will be the design capacity per week. Now To measure the utilization, we need to take the ratio of actual output to the design capacity per week. To measure the efficiency, we need to take the ratio of actual output to the effective capacity per week. So let's try to see. Please try to solve it yourself. I'm going ahead with the answers for this. When you solve it, you will be getting the design capacity per week as 201,600 rolls per week, and the utilization is obtained as 73.4%, and the efficiency is obtained as 84.6%. So a thumb rule is utilization has to be less than the efficiency. Yes, this is correct in this particular case. So whenever you solve it, please make it a point to check it. So this is one of the questions which you should be expecting for your examination. Now, when we started discussing about the capacity, I said the management of capacity and demand, there is a very strong relationship between both of them. So let's say that if there is a case wherein the demand is exceeding the capacity, so more people are interested to purchase certain things, but it's not possible to make so many items because the capacity which you have is lesser than the demand. So one way of doing it is, so people might say, oh yeah, if demand is so high, why don't we increase the capacity? But please understand that adding the capacity, it's not possible to change in a month or in a week time, because if you're planning to purchase a machinery, it takes time for ordering the machinery to arrive at your place, and then installing the machinery, taking trials, and so on. So in a short term, it may not be possible, but on an intermediate or long term, yes, capacity addition is possible. So one of the techniques which is typically practiced is, so the best example is the current situation of COVID-19. Everyone is starting to look for buying the masks, surgical masks to protect yourself. But I placed an order for the surgical mask during the first week of February, but Amazon hasn't delivered it yet. So one way of adjusting this is to delay the lead time. Lead time refers to the time between your ordering and receiving that particular material. So one good example is this particular face mask. Now another example is to raise the prices. For instance, today something is available for say $5. That's why everyone is behind that particular material. Make it to say $20 or whatever. This is not really a good method, but still companies try to do that particular thing because they may not be able to supply to the demand which is coming out. So they always try to play with this particular thing. This is the first case. Case 2 is when the capacity is exceeding the demand. Assume that you have lots of capacity, but your demand is low. So one method is definitely reduce the price. You can definitely do it, or you can try to so that more people can come and purchase the product. Option 2 would be, let's say you make some changes to the product, you make some modification in terms of designing some changes to the product so that the demand can be stimulated. Now, one of the common things which we normally discuss is what is called as adjusting to seasonal demands. For instance, think of Walmart, and during the winter months, for instance from November say till say February or March, you get to see lots of snow boots and jackets, but that's not seen from the month of March till say September or October. The chances of you finding them at Walmart is lesser. So how is it that the company which manufactures this item, how can it survive? Is it that the demand is going to be only for a certain period of time? So how does it work? So let's look at a good example for that. I'm going to the next slide. So that's called as a complementary demand patterns. So the following graph represent, so the x-axis is the months and y-axis is the typical sales in units. So if you see the jet ski engine, there is a fluctuation which you can see here. During certain months the demand is higher. So if you see here, during the summer months the jet ski engine sales typically peak, and during the winter months the jet ski engines sales drops. So a company which is into this particular thing, how can, so during the winter months they have the employees but there is no demand for this, so what can they do? So what typically companies do is as follows. The same company which is selling the jet ski engine will be interested to sell say snowmobile engines as well. So if you look at the sales pattern of the snowmobile, the demand is higher during the winter months, and the demand for this particular thing is lower. The blue line is that particular thing is lower during the months of summer. So what this company can do is during the winter months try to make snowmobile engines, during the summer months make jet ski engines, so the combining both the demands will reduce the fluctuation in the line. So this is a very good thing which many companies typically do. Certain things come up in the summer months, certain things come up during the winter months. Now we are entering into the next concept called as the break-even analysis. This is very important for your examination. This is pretty much similar to the point of indifference calculations which you guys did for your midterm. Let's try to understand what is a break-even point, and let's try to find out a method for calculating the break-even point. So to start with, break-even analysis is a very powerful technique for measuring the process or equipment alternatives. Let's say I have two different processes. I want to find out which process should I go for. This is one of the key methods. The objective is to find in a break-even point calculation, always the objective is to find the particular point at which the cost matches the revenue. So at a certain point we are trying to, in point of indifference we did the similar thing. So in break-even point we are doing the same thing. We are finding out that particular point at which the cost is equal to the revenue. So for estimating the total cost, we need to have the fixed cost, the variable cost, as well as the revenue. We need to have this particular information. If we have this information, let's try to see how to calculate it. So let's look at this particular graph. The blue line represents the fixed cost. Once you have the fixed cost and the variable cost information, you can estimate the total cost. So the total cost line is represented by this red line, and the total revenue line is represented by this green line. So as you can see, this is similar to that example of point of indifference. There is a point at which they are intersecting. So that's the point at which the total cost matches the total revenue, which is called as the break-even point. So let's observe some factors or features of this particular break-even point. So let's say at this particular break-even point, let me mark it using a dotted line. Let's think of this particular, let me change the color to see a blue line. So let's say a dotted line here. This is your around say 370 or so. This is our break-even point. Now, if we go to the left of this particular line, what I will be seeing is the total revenue is less than the total cost. So to the left of this particular line, on this particular side, the total revenue is less than the total cost. That means we will be making loss in that particular domain. And let's look at the other side of this break-even point. Let's say, let me put a double arrow here. This side, if you look at here, the total cost line is at the bottom of the total revenue line. That means the profit will happen once we are doing above this particular point. So this is that particular point at which both numbers are same, no profit and no loss. Let's take an example. Please try to equate the lines. So if I try to equate both the lines, I will be able to find how they are looking like. Now the break-even point is calculated as F divided by P minus V, where P is the selling price and V is the variable cost. If I try to substitute in here, my break-even point in terms of the units, X is the units. So break-even point X is obtained as 5714. If I want to find the break-even point in terms of the dollar, I will be using this particular formula. So this formula will be given for your final examination. So when I substitute here, I find that the dollar value corresponding to the break-even point is $22,857. So is it fine? So, and we can understand if the value is less than 5,714, I will be at a loss. If I am above 5,714, I will be at a profit. So the point is 5714 is that point of indifference or the break-even point at which there is no profit or no loss. Is it making sense? Yeah. Now, the next concept for today is called as the location strategy. So this is from the chapter 8 of your textbook, and you'll be studying the key concepts from this chapter. The objective is to maximize the benefit of location to the firm. So what is the meaning of location strategy? Location strategy refers to selecting the right location for a factory or a particular unit. This can be applied to factories, offices, shops, anything. It has an extremely key role in financials. The reason being, it's a very long-term decision. It's not possible. So for instance, if we decide to use one particular location for our factory, it is not possible to change the location frequently, and there's a huge impact on fixed costs and the variable costs. If I set up my factory at the city center, then my fixed cost, my rent will be really high compared to setting up my factory in other location which is far from the city. These days it is becoming very important because companies are becoming global, and this is very important. And low wage locations are not always the best choice. So the thing is, earlier people used to look for locations where the wage is lower, but if you look at only the wage, you may end up in a location where the wage is low, but the productivity of the employees is very bad. So low wage need not be or should not be the factor which determines the location. And investing dollars to determine the optimal location can be a very wise investment. So let's go to step-by-step thinking. We will start looking at a very top level. Let's say if a company wants to set up a unit, which country should it go for? So if you are looking from a country level decision, should I start my business in Canada, or should I start it in say Mexico or in Australia? If that's the question which we are having, the key factors which should be considered are as follows. It starts with looking at the different political risks in that country, the government rules, and the incentives for doing the business. Once it is decided how the culture and the economy is going to support the business, what about the legal aspects? What about ethics? Whether the market location is closer to the customers, or whether it is closer to the raw materials, or whether it is far from the raw materials. This is very important. What is the cost of labor? Do I have the right talent? Am I going to get the right productivity from the labor? Is my company closer to the suppliers? Is it closer to the location where there is proper power, hydro, energy supply? What about the exchange rate? So these are some of the key factors which decide the selection of a country. Very important for your final examination. There could be a theoretical question or definition type question wherein you are asked to give some factors which determine the selection of a country. Now let's go to one step below. Once that you decided to the country, let's say I'm gonna do my business in Canada, should I do it on the eastern side? Should I do it on the northern side? Should I do it on the western side? Should I do it at Vancouver? Should I do it at whatever, Toronto or Montreal or wherever? How should I decide? Or should I do it in the Waterloo region? So this is very important. It depends on the aspiration of the corporate, how they want to project it, what's the availability of the labor, unions, availability of the labor, what is the cost of the utility. If I'm setting up my facility at the center of the city, I need to pay a lot more than setting up my factory away from the city. What are the regulations that I need to comply to? What about the incentives from the government? What is the proximity to the suppliers, proximity to the raw materials? More or less similar. Now, once you even decide the region, in which region, for instance, I want to set up my company. Should I set it up on the location closer to the Dune, or should I assume that I'm selecting what region of Waterloo? Should I set it up close to the Dune campus? Should I set up my facility, say, closer to whatever, say at the uptown Waterloo? Should I be setting it up at another location, say at Cambridge? So this is a decision. It depends on the restrictions, zoning restrictions, my facility, existing infrastructure, proximity to the highways and waterways and other things. So this is very important. So it's like from a country level decision to a regional level decision to a site specific decision. Now, what is more important for you is This is a numerical question, pretty much easy to solve. You will be given some information and you need to select which country or which site is more appropriate for doing the business. So what we use is called as a factor rating method. So let's look at an example. So this is a 6-step process. So rather than reading this particular 6 steps, let's try to look at an example. The example is as follows. A company has identified 5 different reasons as shown here for its business. For instance, the key KSF or the key success factors for its business are the labor availability and attitude, people to the car ratio, per capita income, tax in structure, education and health. So these are the 5 aspects which the company has decided. And once the 5 different aspects have been shortlisted by the company, it decides to give a certain weight to each of these factors. So this is something which will be given to you. What is the weight that has been assigned to each of these factors? And you'll be given 2 different sites. For instance, in this case, France and Denmark, and the marks which the company has. So for your examination, information till this particular point. So for the exam, what will be given is the information till this much will be provided for the exam. You need to calculate which one is better. So what will we do? So for labor and availability and attitude, 0.25 multiplied by 70 is 17.5. 0.05 multiplied by 50, 2.5. 0.1 multiplied by 10, 8.5, and so on. I add up the numbers, I got 70.4. I do the same thing for Denmark. 0.25 multiplied by, let me use another color, see, yellow. 0.25 multiplied by 70, 60. 0.05 multiplied by 60, and so on. I add up the things, I get 68. So 70.4 is higher than 68. So my recommendation is to go for Denmark. So this is called as a factor rating example, which will be a short question for your exam. So we are towards the end of our presentation. The very last slide is on a service industry. Let's think of, say, a Tim Hortons. If it wants to set up a new unit, should it be setting it up on inside, say, or Conestoga? Should it be setting up its unit outside Conestoga? A service industry per se. Always keep in mind the focus should always be on maximizing the revenue and not on the minimum cost. Minimizing cost should not come as a priority. So major things which they normally look for is what is the purchasing power of the customer in that area. For instance, if you are trying to set up a showroom for a dealership for a high-end car, let's say Tesla or Rolls-Royce, you will be interested in setting up that particular thing in a location where people have the money power to buy. What is the demographics of the people? Demographic refers to the age, the sex, the attitude, the demographics of the people. So for Rolls-Royce, if the target segment is people say between, say, 25 and 45 is the age group. So if your location is having predominantly above 85 adults, you may not set up your factory in that location. Now, what's the competition for your business in that particular location? What's a unique strength which you are having? What about the quality? What about the different policies? So these are the aspects which you will be considering if you're looking at a service business. So with this, I'm stopping for today. I will be posting announcement on the questions which you should practice, and once you practice it, there will be a virtual office hours through Zoom we will arrange. So let us see what time we can arrange that particular thing. I hope you will be gaining good amount of knowledge from this particular video. This is the first time I am doing it. If things are not going well, let's see how to improve this particular thing. Thank you for today, guys. Have a nice day ahead. Bye bye.